I'm Paul Cram with Friends & Co. You're listening to Fresh Air Community Radio, KFAI 90.3 FM, Minneapolis, St. Paul, and around the world at kfai.org. Welcome to The Stories We Carry, voices from Let's Do Lunch Café. I'm Paul Cram, and today we're talking about pride, community, and what it means to live an authentic life over time. Pride conversations often focus on what's happening like right now, but today we wanted to slow down and spend some time with people who have lived through decades of change, challenge, and progress in the LGBTQ plus community. Joining me are two older LGBTQ plus adults, Jeff and Val, and we're also joined by Jethra from Friends & Co.'s Let's Do Lunch Café. Thanks you all for being here. Let's get started. Do you want to say hey, Jeff and Val?
Hello.
Hey, buddy.
Awesome. And we're also joined by Jethra from Friends & Co.'s Let's Do Lunch Café, a free twice-monthly gathering where LGBTQ plus older adults come together for friendship, conversation, and community. Hey, Jethra.
Hey, Paul.
So thank you all for being here. I think I want to just get us started. I'd love to ask, and maybe we each can just answer this question, but in a sentence, what does pride mean to you today? Let's start with Val.
Well, I took this question quite literally and to begin with. And so today, pride means this lovely invitation to join you in making a recording for Fresh Air's 24-hour Pride broadcast. And an invitation I couldn't have imagined when I came out in the 1970s or later in 1980 at my very first Pride March and gathering in Loring Park. But more broadly, pride to me means being in community and solidarity at any time and in any place with our beautiful and diverse LGBTQ plus family. So we can be there for each other, we can be visible, we can be vocal, we can celebrate ourselves, commemorate our struggles, resist hate, and create joy. That's a long sentence. And
it's a long but beautiful sentence. I appreciate that, Val. Jeff, how about you?
For me, pride is about gathering with other people in our day-to-day lives. I myself, and I think it's kind of a generalization that we all kind of tend to be isolated in the non-GLBTQ plus, etc. world. And so it's good for us to all get together and see each other and see each other live and in person and not on the phone and not on our laptops or iPads, and just have direct interaction, have a conversation with each other, and try to move forward in a positive direction politically, and with everyone marching forward, however that looks to each individual person.
I love that. Jethra, how about you?
Okay. As an ally, to me, pride means celebrating and honoring LGBTQ plus folks and letting them know that they matter and that I value who they are and who they choose to love.
Jethra, what is Let's Do Lunch Cafe for everyone that's listening? Because I know that's where we're all kind of coming from. And why does it matter?
So, Paul, you started talking about this a little bit. I'll just reiterate. Let's Do Lunch Cafe is a free twice monthly gathering where LGBTQ plus older adults come together to enjoy good food, great company, and meaningful connections. The reason it matters is because building strong social connections is really important for everyone's physical and mental well-being.
And why are spaces specifically for older LGBTQ plus adults still important?
Great question. So spaces and places like Let's Do Lunch Cafe are critical because for some LGBTQ plus older adults, aging can mean going back into the closet. At Friends & Co., we're trying to create spaces where they don't have to.
Jeff and Valerie, like you both have met, and you met at Let's Do Lunch Cafe. I think that's correct, right?
Yes.
Love it. we'll probably jump back to a little bit about Let's Lunch Cafe, but I'm so excited just to kind of dive into some of your experiences. And I'm going to just cue this up. First question is going to go to Jeff here. What challenges did you or do you experience now or growing up as a member of the LGBTQ plus community that younger generations may not know about?
I grew up in northern Minnesota, so it was a much different environment. I grew up in Hibbing. I am a person with a disability. I'm legally blind and deaf in my left ear. So I lost my vision and my hearing when I was 6 years old. I had a brain tumor. My life in general being a little bit isolated, different from other kids. And kids are cruel to each other, especially if you're different in any kind of a way. And then underneath that, I kind of had a suspicion that I kind of liked boys, but man, I certainly did suppress that for decades. And I think that's something that young people just don't need to do anymore. If they have these feelings and acknowledge them, they can just be out and move forward with that. They don't have to deal with denial and internalized homophobia and all those stages that I went through when I was young. And in a lot of ways, young people nowadays are, they have a much easier path, a much easier road than I did.
Yeah. Yeah. That internalized homophobia part gets me as a fellow queer man. Valerie, do you have anything to add to that too? Or any sort of insight as well?
Well, I do. When I thought about the question about challenges that today's younger generation LGBTQ may not be aware of, I kind of looked at different phases of my life and came up with about three, but I'm only going to mention two right now. One was being born in 1949 and growing up in the 1950s and very early 1960s. And if there's one word that's used commonly actually to characterize this era, it's conformity. And as a little white girl growing up at this time, conformity meant for me rigid binary gender roles, compulsory heterosexuality, misogyny and sexism, racism. There's more, but those certainly formed me as a child in my family and community. Basically, it was kind of like, and I came from very loving parents and family, and that's one thing that helped. I'm not saying that my parents displayed all of those, but that was the culture. And in a way, when I look back, it was like being in a lockbox of enforced cultural attitudes and expectations, all of which came from outside of me, where there was no way to have any inner knowledge that I was a lesbian. I believe strongly I was born a lesbian, but there was no path. There was no guidance or nurturance to realize that. So it was like at a very early age, I was split. Part of me, a very important part, was hidden from myself. And obviously that was going to have a huge ramification. And I did not come out till I was 25. I had a quarter century of being separated from a core part of myself. So what helped? Well, loving parents and family. My mother was a very strong woman for her time, a feminist before second wave feminism, and who believed in leadership roles for women. My family believed in education for women. That helped. And then coming of age in the civil rights movement, during the civil rights movement, during Vietnam protests, during the hippie generation that was questioning parental ideas. All of this started to open my world. And of course, gay liberation with Stonewall, as it was called then. Gay liberation started the women's movement. So these things all helped me to begin to be on the path that would lead to coming to know myself.
It sounds like your parents made a bit of a difference in your journey.
Oh, they made a huge difference. And we held on with each other, even when I came out to them when I was about 31 years old, which was really a hard thing to do for me and very painful for them. I don't know if they really ever understood, but we held on with each other and things eventually got better.
Glad to hear it. I guess kind of the same question for you, Jeff, too. Was there someone sort of in your journey that stands out or that like made a difference?
For an actual person that helped me out that was further down my path, there was no support whatsoever from my parents. When I did finally come out to them, it did not go well at all. And my mother was very much of a churchgoer, and after I did come out to them, periodically she would send me sermons from her pastor Xeroxed like 500% larger so I could see it. So there was no support there whatsoever. But where there was support was a smaller subculture down here in the cities when I moved down to Minneapolis, and I kind of began to meet some people. And growing up in northern Minnesota, we always heard about those people on Hennepin Avenue living that alternate lifestyle. And then when I came down here to Minneapolis and went to Hennepin Avenue, and I quickly realized those people are my people. And that's kind of my first taste of interacting with other people and getting support from other people. And then organizationally, I started going to the Men's Center, which is in uptown Minneapolis. And they had a couple support groups for primarily men who are, coming out of the closet and need that kind of support. So that was my first, I guess, structured support system. And that's actually where I met my very first boyfriend. He was a vision impaired guy who volunteered there, and he wanted to meet any other gay vision impaired people. So someone kind of set us up. Unfortunately, he was my very first boyfriend. And I say that because back at that time, the old internalized homophobia thing was still there. So I was, well, am I gay or am I not? Am I straight? And I was going to a therapist trying to figure this all out. And so, sorry to say, he was part of that transition in my life. And so I would push him away and pull him back. And finally, he said, I just can't handle that anymore. And so we did remain friends for the rest of his life. But
I'm smiling only just from the perspective of I cringe a little bit at some of my first boyfriends too. How hard that can be. Valerie, what were you gonna add?
Well, I just have one more thing I'd like to add about challenges that the younger LGBTQ communities may not be aware of or fully aware of. And that was in the 1980s, after I had come out, had moved here, and I had started the relationship with the love of my life. The issue of building LGBTQ families in the 1980s. And for me, my partner and I were creating a lesbian family. She was in the process of adopting her 3 foster children that she had fostered. When we got together, when I moved in, we created a new family. We built families. And we know as LGBTQ families that we build our families, we create our families, we name our families. But when Hennepin County found out that we were lesbians, they put an immediate stop on one of the adoptions going through. One of them had already taken place, and we were thrown into chaos. LGBTQ families, parents were losing their children. Co-parents had no rights to children that they loved as their own. We called this period the custody fight because they literally reopened the whole home study, and they required me to meet with a psychiatrist to be evaluated. The court language and the court order was just devastating about determining the suitability of the family to raise children. And the children were questioned, and my partner Jackie was questioned, and it was a terrible time, but we survived it. We gathered support from our communities. We got letters sent. We found a lesbian lawyer to represent us, and Hennepin County hedged and hedged and hedged, but finally allowed the adoption to go through. It was a very brutal thing, and it was really hard on the children. Yeah. As well as our relationship, but we survived it, and we were helped by the surrounding communities we belonged to. And then a few years later, in the mid-'80s, Rainbow Families as an organization was organized in the Twin Cities, which was a real breakthrough for community among those of us creating and having families and children. So that was a wonderful step forward. Yeah. But it was a journey, and it was going on all over, this problem.
Did your adoptions eventually go through?
We raised.
Obviously, there was a lot to get there, but
my partner and I raised 2 generations of kids, and she adopted by herself the first generation during this time when the county stepped in, and later on, I adopted the beginning of the second generation of kids. Yeah. And you still had to be careful in the mid-'90s. This was 96 when I adopted. You still had to be careful to get the right attorney and the right judge, but it was becoming easier.
Can you remember like a moment, and when was it, when you finally thought to yourself, like, I can finally be myself here in this place? I think of it as like exhaling, like,
Well, I can. I can think of many moments, but the first moment I remember is when I was still living in Michigan, and I had fallen in love with my first woman lover, and she with me, and it was just like I felt like I had finally come home to myself. It was such a feeling of freedom that I finally felt like I was meeting myself after so many years of thinking there was something wrong with me, because especially as I entered adolescence and early adulthood, that I just didn't feel attracted to men. I almost married a man, unfortunately did not. I just didn't know myself, and that was a truly moment of freedom and just like who I was finally.
What about you, Jeff?
I guess for me, the great sign that, I really am a gay man was I was doing therapy with a therapist, and I was dating women at the same time, trying to figure out if I was gay or straight or bi or, what the deal was. And it was very confusing. And so the therapist and I talked about it, and he said, you kind of need to really choose one and focus on one for a while and figure out if that's the path that you want. And so I said, okay, so I'm going to stop with men and I'm going to date women. Well, that's what I said, but my actions were the opposite. So I didn't see any more women, and I started seeing men, and then I had that Oprah aha moment, and it's like, oh well, this is the sign, this is the proof that I really am gay, and this is it, and no looking back from that point onward.
I have another question to lead into. This kind of relates a little bit to Let's Do Lunch, but like when you think about community today, what does that look like in your life?
Well, I can give an answer.
Yeah. Sounds good.
When I saw this question, basically at this point in my life, I'm 77 years old. And as I've aged, community means everything to me. Community and connection mean everything to me. And that relates to, another great challenge in my life, which has to do with aging and the loss of my love of my life, Jackie, to Alzheimer's disease after a long battle. She died at a comparatively young age of 69. And basically, after her death, and I had been her primary caregiver for the 6 years she lived with us, and meanwhile, our kids had grown up. And so after she died, I was, in some respects, even though I had friends and I had family who cared about me, I was very isolated, very alone. And I had to basically rebuild my life.
Mm.
And I felt like I had just suddenly arrived, been dropped in old age, because, I had spent my 60s rather caring for Jackie. And all of a sudden she was gone, and here I was, and I realized I was getting old. I was widowed and grieved, and I had to recreate my life. And so community has come to mean everything to me. I don't feel as a lesbian, as a member of the LGBT community, that there really is a way forward without being in community. But I had to re-engage. I had to find it. I found it in my recovery community. I found it in Let's Do Lunch, and that's why Let's Do Lunch has really been so important in my life. That's kind of segs into the next question about what does it mean, but
Yeah.
It was one of the things to discover Let's Do Lunch that really saved me and brought me back into community with the LGBT community and the elders like myself who had that long arc of experience and needed each other. And Let's Do Lunch provided that. Let's Do Lunch was the only organization at the time in the Twin Cities, and I think really greater Minnesota, that specifically served the elder LGBTQ community as their sole audience. It helped bring me back to life. I needed to nourish friendships I already had and keep them, and that's what I mean by community and connection. I needed to nourish and be involved with my family, and I needed to find a purpose in life. And I found that Let's Do Lunch, my recovery community, and my faith community. And they all intersect. Reconciling faith communities are very active in reconciling with the LGBT and serving them. Community means everything to me. I could not exist without it.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that answer, Val. Jeff, I'm curious also, can you share a little bit about what community means to you as well? And maybe even too, what do you appreciate, about this stage of life?
Well, I will just say in the beginning, communities are very important. When I was young and coming out, I came out of the closet in my later 20s. And back then I was younger and thinner and hairy. And so I kind of fell into the bear type community. And then I kind of discovered the leather part of my life. So then I kind of fell into the leather community. And then over time, those communities kind of morphed together. And some of those people that I knew from back in those little communities are now in the more mature community, and they actually attend the Let's Do Lunch thing. And one of them actually reached out to me and told me about it. And that's how I found out about Let's Do Lunch. And that was my introduction to it. Because of my vision disability, I generally tend to be more isolated. I cannot drive. I do have a little bit of vision, but not a whole lot. A good illustration of that is if I'm at the top of the stairs and I see something at the bottom of the stairs, I think it's my cat, so I talk to it. And then as I walk down the stairs and get to the bottom, I realize it's not my cat, it's my shoes.
Sure.
And so that kind of gives you some insight as to, my kind of vision loss. And a long time, for many years, I was way in denial about it. So I never used a cane and I never learned Braille and all that accessibility type stuff. I never did until my vision was degrading to the point that I would have accidents and I would walk into stuff and trip over stuff and get hit by cars. And then that forced me to acknowledge that, yes, my vision is degraded to the point that I am now have to accept my vision loss. And actually that kind of correlates to my coming out process because they kind of were both the same time frame in my life. So not sure if one helped the other one, but anyway, they both kind of seem to happen simultaneously.
You mean simultaneously as in like as your vision loss, if I'm understanding what you're saying, as your vision loss increased, you became more and more like out of the closet?
Yeah, as my vision loss decreased, at the same time I was dealing with the coming out process.
Yeah.
And so both of them kind of happened at the same time, which I never really made that connection until relatively recently, for whatever reason. Maybe I was learning to be more comfortable with myself and acknowledging that I was a gay man, and at the same time acknowledging that, I am a blind man also.
Mm-hmm. If you could talk to your younger self, what would you want them to know?
When I read your proposed questions, I was really hoping you weren't going to do this one, but I will make a stab at it.
You are,
because it's extremely emotional. I guess I would tell my younger self that I would tell my younger self that it's okay to be who you are. And denying who you are just makes life not worth living. So you need to acknowledge who you are and start your way down that path. So, and I was right. I did get emotional about this question.
And I appreciate the emotion and you being willing to share it with us very much.
Thank you, Jeff, for sharing that. I got emotional just listening to you because our journeys, and they're all different, but our journeys have not been easy. And we carry sorrow with us. It's appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
It's appropriate to grieve. And I have a depth of sadness that is always with me, not always about my past, about the state of the world at this time in my life, a real sadness. And I guess I would tell my younger self, there's actually room in you for all of this experience, all these emotions, but you're on the right path in accepting yourself, in knowing yourself finally, in being sober. For my journey, I had to address that as a recovering alcoholic. I would also try to comfort her and urge her to let go of some of the self-doubt and fear of failure that made her want to hide, because hiding is what so many of us did for safety as a default. And I would also tell her that you will be amazed if you stay on that path by all the love and care you give and receive.
Paul, can I answer the question as well?
Please.
What Jeff and Val said made me reflect on my younger self, and I would tell my younger self how important it is to be kind to everyone, because you don't know what they're dealing with. I am so grateful for the opportunity to be a part of an organization that values the LGBTQ plus community. And it hardly seems like work when I'm preparing for a Let's Do Lunch Cafe or Let's Do Coffee gathering, because it is such a privilege and an honor and a joy to be a part of this program. So thank you, Val and Jeff. Without you, my work would be quite boring.
Well, Jethra, I want to say thank you to you. And frankly, I don't know anyone who works harder than you do to do what you do for all of us in the community.
Yes, you definitely make the lunch enjoyable, and making sure that my name tag has the cute little rainbow on it that represents that I'm on the advisory committee to help kind of guide the Let's Do Lunch program. It's quite the experience and make it look so smooth.
Jethra rocks it out.
Thank you.
Well, ditto for that.
Hey, I passed the rainbow sticker responsibility on to Val. So from now on, Val is in charge.
Val's in charge of the rainbows.
I love
She
it.
voluntold me, and I'm on the advisory committee too, and I love doing it. So
Yeah,
I'm there to serve.
I do want to one sort of quick fire question. Just give me a few word answer on this one. But if you were a summer drink, what summer drink would you be? Val. No pressure.
Really? I mean,
or if somebody else knows which one they'd be, spit it out.
Okay, limeade. I love limeade.
Limeade.
Yeah,
excellent.
Limeade. Cold on ice.
Yes, cold on ice. Limeade. How about you, Jeff?
I would be a cosmopolitan.
Ooh.
In a nice fancy glass and chilled and out on the patio in our backyard.
Excellent. Yep, I can see it. How about you, Jethra?
I don't know. How about you, Paul?
I know mine. Mine would be an ice cold lemonade because life gives us these lemons and we got to make something good for Mo.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
I cannot stop that. I'll pass.
I have to say that, can I say for Jethra, because from working with Jethra I'd say that Jethra, probably kind of similar to Valerie, I think you'd be lemonade with like cherry lemonade or something with a little twist on it. But
I thought you were going to say kombucha because you see me drinking that in the office every day.
I do. No, and thank you so much, Jethra. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Val. I really appreciate the time that you've taken to share some of your stories and your insights with us. And I do want to say, if anyone listening wants to find out more about Let's Do Lunch Café, they can find out more on Friends & Co.'s website, which is www.friendsco.org. Happy Pride.
Happy Pride.
Happy Pride, everyone.
Celebrate.
Grab that rainbow.
Oh, thank you so much, Jeff, Val, and Jethra, for being here and for sharing your experiences with us. Yeah, the stories we carry matter. They remind us where we've been, how far we've come, and how much we still have to learn from one another. If you'd like to learn more about Friends & Co. or Let's Do Lunch Cafe, visit friendsco.org. Happy Pride, everybody. Thanks for listening.